Gun sales increased in Illinois in the past year, one of only 4 states to do so.
Downstate federal judge has just thrown out Illinois' latest gun ban. The judge.
Fight is not over.
Without having to go through the 4473 form.
There's a piece of legislation moving through the Illinois state legislature right now that carries a price tag so massive it could single-handedly wipe out every gun manufacturer, every retailer, and every wholesaler operating inside the state. And the worst part, most people living in Illinois have absolutely no idea it's coming. Let's talk about what's happening in Illinois, because the situation unfolding in Springfield right now is unlike anything we've seen in the modern era of firearms legislation. While most other states have wrapped up their legislative sessions and gun owners in those places already know the damage that's been done, Illinois is still very much in play. The state legislature remains in session, bills are still moving, and the deadlines that are supposed to govern how those bills advance are, well, let's just say they're more like suggestions than actual rules. Here's the thing you need to understand about how the Illinois legislature operates. There's a procedural milestone known as the third reading deadline. In other states, people call it the House of Origin cutoff. The concept is simple. If a bill starts in the House, it needs to pass through the House by this deadline so it can cross over to the Senate and eventually land on the governor's desk. Same thing in reverse for Senate bills. In Illinois, that deadline was set for April 17th. Sounds firm, right? Sounds like there's a built-in safety mechanism that prevents last-minute legislative chaos. Except there isn't. The majority party in Illinois can vote to suspend the rules whenever it wants and do essentially whatever it pleases. If you need proof, just look at how quickly sweeping firearms legislation has been rammed through in the past. So while April 17th looks like a hard stop on paper, in practice it's barely a speed bump. And that matters enormously when you look at the timeline of the bills we're about to discuss, because several of them aren't even scheduled to exit committee until April 24th, a full week past that supposed deadline. That should tell you everything about how seriously the legislature takes its own procedural rules. So let's get into it. Let's break down the bills that every gun owner in Illinois needs to be tracking right now, starting with the single most consequential piece of firearms legislation that has ever been proposed in the state. It's called the Rifle Act, and it exists in 2 parallel forms. One version lives in the House, the other in the Senate. This is a strategy that's becoming increasingly common in states that are aggressively pushing civilian disarmament. You file the same bill in both chambers simultaneously. That way, opponents have to fight a two-front war. Even if you manage to kill one version, the other keeps moving. It doubles the defensive effort required and dramatically increases the chances that some version of the legislation survives. Now here's where things get truly staggering. The original cost structure embedded in the Rifle Act carried a price tag of $866 million. Let that number sink in for a moment. $866 million in regulatory costs and compliance burdens designed to be imposed on firearms manufacturers, retailers, and wholesalers doing business in Illinois. There have been rumors circulating that this figure has been reduced in newer versions of the bill, but even the reduced number reportedly remains in the hundreds of millions of dollars. That's not a rounding error. That's an extinction-level event for the firearms industry inside state borders. The entire point of a cost structure like that is to make it financially impossible for businesses to operate. You don't need to ban guns outright if you can simply make it economically unviable to sell them. The result is the same. The state becomes a firearms desert, and lawful citizens lose access to their constitutional rights not through a direct prohibition but through financial strangulation. The House version of this bill has picked up 48 sponsors. The Senate version has 26. Those aren't small numbers. Those are numbers that indicate genuine legislative momentum. The House version has been sitting in the Rules Committee since late March, but word is it could be pulled onto the floor for a third reading and final vote at essentially any time. The Senate version has been parked in the Firearms Committee since early March and has a new scheduled exit date of April 24th. Both bills are showing unmistakable signs of life, and anyone who dismisses them as dead on arrival is making a dangerous miscalculation. Now let's shift to the next category of legislation that's generating real concern, and that's the effort to ban an entire class of popular handguns. There are 3 separate bills targeting this goal. 2 of them are in the Senate, 1 is in the House. The House version has been effectively flatlined since it was introduced. It still has only its original sponsor, went into committee, and has never resurfaced. That's the pattern of a bill that nobody is seriously championing. It's dead in all but name. But the Senate tells a different story. One of the 2 Senate versions has picked up 6 additional sponsors since it was filed. The other has added at least 1. Both are sitting in the Firearms Committee with scheduled exit dates of April 24th. They're not moving fast, but they're not dead either. There's a pulse. And in a legislature where rules can be suspended at will and deadlines don't actually mean what they say, a pulse is enough to be dangerous. Now, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something that often gets lost in these discussions. Not everything coming out of Springfield is bad. There are legislators who are fighting on the other side of this issue, and they deserve recognition even when the math isn't in their favor. 2 state senators introduced multiple pieces of legislation that would have expanded concealed carry reciprocity with other states and lowered the eligibility age for state firearms identification cards. Neither of those bills had any realistic chance of advancing given the composition of the legislature, but the effort matters. It sends a signal, it creates a record, and it lets constituents know that someone in the building is actually representing their interests. So, credit where credit is due. There's also a bill dealing with concealed carry privileges for former correctional officers, creating a framework for them to maintain their eligibility after leaving the profession. That one has shown a little bit of movement, but doesn't appear to be a top priority for either side. And then there's one more bill that absolutely needs to be mentioned, not because it's going anywhere, but because of how perfectly it illustrates the mentality driving some of this legislation. One state senator introduced a bill that would have stripped citizens of their driver's license and their ability to register a vehicle if they lost their state firearms identification card. Read that again slowly and let it process. Lose your gun card, lose your ability to drive. The connection between those two things was never explained. No logical rationale was ever offered for why the revocation of a firearms permit should have anything to do with motor vehicle registration. It's the kind of legislative proposal that seems designed purely to punish gun owners, to create additional collateral consequences for anyone who falls out of compliance with the state's firearms bureaucracy, regardless of whether the underlying reason has anything to do with public safety. The good news is that this particular bill appears to be going absolutely nowhere. It's flatlined, and it deserves to stay that way. So let's bring this all together. If you're living in Illinois and you care about your ability to lawfully own firearms, there are 4 specific pieces of legislation you need to be watching like a hawk right now. On the Rifle Act front, that's the House version and the Senate version, both carrying that industry-crushing regulatory framework. On the handgun ban front, that's the 2 Senate bills that are still showing vital signs in the Firearms Committee. Everything else is either dead, dying, or too insignificant to move the needle. But those 4 bills represent a genuine and immediate threat to the firearms landscape in Illinois. And here's the part that makes all of this so frustrating for the people living through it. Illinois has already been through round after round of restrictions. The state's firearms laws are already among the most burdensome in the country. The identification card system, the waiting periods, the assault weapons legislation that was pushed through at breakneck speed. Each new session brings another wave, another set of proposals designed to tighten the grip a little further. It's incremental by design. Each individual bill can be framed as modest or reasonable, but the cumulative effect over years and decades is a state where the practical ability to exercise a constitutional right has been systematically dismantled. What makes this particular session different is the scale of ambition. The Rifle Act isn't incremental. It's not a tweak to existing regulations. It's an attempt to fundamentally reshape the economic reality of the firearms industry within the state. If something carrying that kind of price tag becomes law, the effects won't be gradual. They'll be immediate and catastrophic for businesses and consumers alike. And the parallel bill strategy ensures that even sophisticated opposition efforts face an uphill battle. The lesson here extends beyond Illinois. The tactics being employed in Springfield, the companion bills, the suspended deadlines, the massive regulatory cost structures designed to achieve prohibition through economics rather than explicit bans. These are strategies that will be replicated in other states. What works in one legislature gets studied and adopted in others. The playbook is being written in real time, and Illinois is the testing ground. If you care about how this plays out, whether you live in Illinois or not, stay informed. Track the bills. Understand the procedures. Know when the deadlines are, and more importantly, know when those deadlines don't actually matter. The details are where the fight is won or lost, and the details in Illinois right now are deeply concerning. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.